Ethan Hayes had always trusted his instincts, but that night something felt different the moment he stepped out of his car. The air was colder than usual, the neighborhood strangely quiet, and even the warm lights of the street felt dim. He didn't know why, but he felt as if something important was waiting for him behind his front door, something that had been building for years without him noticing. He tried to shake off the feeling as he carried his groceries up the porch steps. But the weight in his chest only grew stronger. Before he could unlock his door, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned, a bit startled, and froze when he saw Claire Bennett and Aaron Cole walking toward him together. The two of them rarely arrived at the same time. Usually, one would call ahead, or the other would send a text. But tonight, they stood side by side, both wearing expressions he didn't recognize. Not sadness exactly, not anger, but something heavier, like the air before a storm. Claire, with her soft brown hair tucked behind her ears, looked anxious in a way Ethan had never seen. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her as she approached. Aaron, taller and usually so steady, seemed uneasy too. His jaw was set and his eyes kept shifting between Ethan and the ground. Something was definitely wrong, and Ethan felt his heartbeat pick up speed. He didn't even think to greet them. The shock of seeing them together unexpectedly pushed the words right out of his mouth. "Is everything okay?" Neither answered immediately. Instead, they exchanged a quick look, one of those silent glances that said more than actual words. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Whatever they were about to say, it wasn't something simple. With a shaky breath, Claire finally spoke. "Ethan, can we come inside? We need to talk. It's important." Her voice was gentle, but there was a tremble in it that Ethan couldn't ignore. Aaron nodded once, slowly confirming the seriousness of the moment. Ethan stepped aside almost automatically, letting them in. His mind was racing now. They had never used that tone with him before, not in all the years they'd known each other. Inside, they didn't sit down like they normally would. They didn't kick off their shoes or wander into the kitchen. They just stood near the living room doorway, waiting for Ethan to turn around. When he did, he saw something raw in their eyes, something like honesty mixed with fear. The sight of it made him swallow hard. Ethan tried to lighten the mood. "You two are starting to worry me. What's going on?" But neither of them smiled. Claire stepped forward first, her voice quiet but steady. "Ethan, you can't keep acting like nothing's changed." He opened his mouth to ask what she meant, but before he could, Aaron added, "We've been carrying something for a long time, both of us, and tonight we decided we can't hide it anymore." The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. Ethan felt a wave of confusion. He had no idea what they were talking about. Claire and Aaron were his closest friends, his chosen family. They spent holidays together, movie nights, weekend trips. They shared everything. What could they possibly be hiding? Claire took a breath, and Ethan noticed her fingers shaking slightly. "This isn't easy for us," she said, "but we owe you the truth." Ethan felt the tension sharpen inside his chest. He looked from Claire to Aaron, waiting, hoping they would just say it so he could finally understand why they were acting so strangely. Aaron spoke next, voice low. "We didn't plan for this to happen, but it did, and now we have to face it." Still no answers. Ethan felt frustration mixed with fear. "Face what?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm even. Though he felt anything but calm, Claire met his eyes, and in that moment Ethan realized she was just as scared as he was. Not of him, of the consequences of whatever they were about to reveal. She stepped close enough that he could see the tiny lines of worry on her forehead. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then finally whispered, "Ethan, it's about us." Those 3 simple words hit him harder than anything else that night. Us, the meaning wasn't clear, but the weight behind it was. Something about their relationship, this trio they built, had shifted. And they were here to tell him how. Ethan felt his pulse thudding in his ears. 100 thoughts ran through his mind, each one more confusing than the last. Had he done something wrong? Were they upset with him? Was there a problem between Claire and Aaron? He searched their faces for any hint. But all he saw was uncertainty and something that almost looked like sadness. He sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, trying to steady his breathing. Claire and Aaron stayed standing, watching him with the same fragile expression. He could feel how hard this moment was for them, but that didn't make it any easier for him to understand. Claire finally broke the silence. "We promise. This isn't bad. It's just something we can't ignore." "Anymore?" Aaron added, "and it involves all three of us." That sentence made Ethan's heart jump. The confusion only deepened. He felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to shift beneath him. Claire reached out, her fingers brushing his hand gently. It was a small touch, but it carried more emotion than he'd ever felt from her before. "Please let us explain," she said. "We've been afraid to tell you. Afraid it would change everything. But pretending is starting to hurt." Ethan gulped, his mouth suddenly dry. He didn't know where this conversation was going, but he knew without a doubt that by the end of the night, his life would be different. The air around them felt charged, thick with something unspoken but undeniably real. Before he could respond, Aaron stepped closer to his voice, deeper, softer than usual. "Just hear us out. That's all we ask." And in that moment, Ethan realized that whatever they were about to confess wasn't going to be simple or small or easy to process. It was something personal, something emotional, something that had been held back for far too long. He nodded slowly, bracing himself. "Okay," he said quietly. "Tell me everything." And that was the moment the night truly shifted, when secrets began to break open and the first truth started to surface, pulling Ethan into a story he never expected to live. Ethan didn't know what to expect when he asked them to explain, but he didn't imagine the silence that followed. Claire and Aaron stood in front of him as if they were gathering courage from the air around them. Their eyes held something, vulnerable, almost fragile. Something that made Ethan's heart beat faster in a way he couldn't fully understand yet. Claire was the first to speak. She stepped closer, her voice steady but soft. "Ethan, you've been important to us for a long time, more than you realize." She looked briefly at Aaron, who gave her an encouraging nod before she continued. "Somewhere along the way, something changed for both of us. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something we talked about. It just happened." Ethan's breath caught. He had no idea where she was going with this, but the seriousness in her tone made him sit up straighter. Claire never spoke this directly. Unless something was deeply personal, Aaron stepped forward too, his hands resting at his sides, his shoulders squared but tense. He wasn't the type to show nerves easily. Yet tonight he looked like someone walking into a conversation that could break or rebuild everything. "I didn't even realize Claire felt the same way," he said quietly. "We kept it to ourselves. I thought it would pass. She thought it would pass. But it didn't." Ethan blinked, confused. "Feel the same about what?" Claire's voice trembled slightly. "About you." The words hit Ethan with a force he couldn't hide. His breath stumbled, his chest tightening as Claire kept speaking, trying to fill the stunned silence between them. "It wasn't something either of us wanted to admit. You've always been our closest friend, the one person we trusted more than anyone. We didn't want to risk ruining that. But hiding it started to feel wrong. It became harder and harder to pretend nothing was happening." Aaron nodded. "That's why we talked last week. We needed to understand what was going on. And when we did, we realized the truth. We both care for you, more deeply than we meant to." Ethan felt the room tilt slightly, like the ground beneath him wasn't steady anymore. He looked between them, trying to understand the weight behind their confession. He had cared for them, too, of course he had, but he had never imagined his feelings were mirrored. "And certainly not by both of them," Claire continued softly. "We know how this sounds. We know it's unusual. But the last thing we ever wanted was to lie to you. You deserve honesty. Ethan tried to find words, but nothing came. His thoughts tangled together in a rush: surprise, curiosity, fear, warmth, confusion. He had always felt a connection with Claire, one that made his heart squeeze in quiet moments. And he had always felt something unique with Aaron Tuan. Emotional closeness he never fully understood but never questioned. But hearing both of them admit something deeper, that felt like a storm breaking open inside him. Aaron glanced at Claire and then at Ethan. "We didn't come to ask for anything tonight. We didn't come to force a decision. We just needed to tell you the truth, because keeping it inside was hurting all three of us." Claire nodded. "We didn't want to lose you by hiding it any longer." The words were gentle, but they carried a heavy impact. Ethan felt his breath grow uneven, not out of fear, but out of the sheer intensity of the moment. "Why now?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire took a step closer. "Because pretending is exhausting. Ethan, every time I told myself to forget how I felt, it hurt more. And when Aaron told me he was struggling with the same thing, we realized we couldn't ignore it anymore." Aaron's voice dropped to a tone Ethan rarely heard from him: soft, sincere, almost tender. "We thought honesty was the only way forward. No more guessing, no more wondering, just the truth." Ethan leaned back slightly, running a hand through his hair as his mind tried to keep up. His heart felt too full, caught between being overwhelmed and strangely touched. "This is a lot," he admitted quietly. "We know," Claire said immediately. "And we're not expecting you to say anything right now," Aaron added. "We're not here to confuse you. We just didn't want to lie anymore." The vulnerability in their voices shook something inside Ethan. The two people he trusted most were standing in front of him, exposing feelings they had never dared to speak aloud. And they trusted him enough to bring the truth to his doorstep. For a moment, silence settled over the three of them again. But it wasn't the heavy, fearful silence from earlier. It was a softer one filled with emotion, honesty, and unspoken questions. Ethan looked at Claire, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. Then he looked at Aaron, who held himself with the same fragile bravery. He knew this moment was changing something between them, whether they wanted it to or not. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Ethan finally asked. Aaron answered first. "Because we were afraid of losing you," Claire added, "and we weren't sure if we were just confused. But when hiding it started affecting our friendship, we knew it was time." Ethan felt a mixture of compassion and longing rise inside him. He could see how much it had taken for them to be here, to share something so personal. And he knew they weren't lying. Everything about their expressions, their posture, their voices, every detail told him this was real. He exhaled slowly, meeting their eyes. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything yet," Claire replied gently. "Just let it sit with you." Aaron nodded. "Whatever you feel, we'll respect it." The sincerity in their promises eased some of the tension. Inside Ethan, he still didn't understand what came next, or how this would affect their lives. But one thing was clear: they weren't trying to push him into anything. They weren't trying to overwhelm him. They were simply trying to be honest. Ethan looked down at his hands, then back up at them. "I care about both of you too. I always have." "I just didn't realize." Claire smiled softly. "We know," Aaron added quietly. "This doesn't have to be rushed." Ethan nodded slowly, still processing, still trying to understand how everything changed so suddenly. Yet even in the confusion, he felt something warm building inside him, something like hope, something like possibility. But before he could settle into that feeling, Claire took a deep breath and said something that made his pulse jump again. "There's something else we need to tell you." Her voice was gentle, but the tension returned instantly, and Ethan braced himself once more. The days after Claire and Aaron's confession moved quickly, but for Ethan, everything inside felt slow and heavy, like his emotions were trying to catch up with the truth. He kept replaying the moment they told him they both cared for him deeply, intentionally, honestly, with something he never expected, something that changed the way he looked at his own friendships, his own heart, even his own future. Work became the only place he could hide, even though hiding didn't really work. His mind wandered constantly. Every time he tried to focus on a design project, his thoughts drifted back to Aaron's steady voice or Claire's trembling hands. Every night he lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what he felt. Not what he was supposed to feel, what he truly felt. He cared for both of them. That had never been the question. But this new weight, this new meaning behind everything, left him unsure how to move forward without hurting someone he loved. After 3 days of restless nights and unanswered texts, Ethan finally couldn't ignore the tension anymore. He sent a message to both Claire and Aaron asking them to come over. He didn't know what he would say, but he knew silence wasn't helping anyone. And he didn't want them to think he was avoiding the truth. When the doorbell rang that evening, Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He opened the door to find them standing there together again, just like that first night, but this time their expressions weren't filled with fear. Instead, they looked patient, cautious, and hopeful, as if they were ready for whatever he needed to say. Inside, Ethan moved quickly, almost nervously, pouring tea for them before they could ask him if he was okay. His hands shook slightly as he handed Claire her mug. She offered him a soft smile, the kind that told him she wasn't angry or scared, just waiting. Aaron sat down on the edge of the couch, watching Ethan carefully. "Take your time," he said, his voice low and calming. Ethan sat across from them, inhaling slowly. "I didn't call you here to give an answer," he said quickly. I needed to talk. I needed to understand how we're supposed to move through this without breaking something important." Claire set her tea down gently. "We don't expect you to make a choice," she said. "We never wanted to trap you between us." Aaron nodded. "We just wanted you to know how we feel. Whatever happens after that is something we can figure out together." Ethan appreciated the reassurance, but the truth was, part of him was scared. Scared of leading them on. Scared of disappointing them. Scared of wanting too much. "I don't want to lose either of you," he said quietly. "But I also don't know how to handle all of this." Claire leaned forward, her eyes warm. "You don't have to handle it alone." The room fell quiet for a moment. A calm, meaningful quiet. It wasn't filled with fear or tension like before. It was filled with understanding. The kind people share after a painful truth has been spoken and accepted. Then Claire exchanged a glance with Aaron. A silent conversation passing between them. Ethan caught it, and something deep in his chest tightened, wondering if he was about to hear something even heavier. Claire took a breath. "There's something else we need to tell you. Not to pressure you, but to be honest." Ethan's heart thumped sharply. "Something else?" Aaron spoke this time. "Before we tell you, you need to know this. Whatever happens next is your decision. We won't push you, and we won't make this complicated for you." Ethan nodded slowly, bracing himself. Claire looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "When Aaron and I talked last week, we realized something important. Something that made us look at our friendship differently." Aaron continued. "We realized that our feelings for you weren't accidental. They grew over time because of who you are. How kind you are. How loyal. How patient." Ethan felt heat rise to his face. Compliments always made him uncomfortable. But hearing them now, in this moment, made his heart feel too full. Claire added softly, "And we realized something else. We both want to explore this carefully, respectfully, with you, but only if you want the same." The words hit Ethan like a quiet wave. They weren't demanding anything. They weren't asking him to choose between them or make a decision he wasn't ready for. They were simply telling him they wanted the chance to show him what their feelings meant, gently, slowly, without expectations. Ethan's voice came out smaller than he expected. "But what if this ruins our friendship?" Shook his head. "It won't. Not if we talk. Not if we stay honest." Claire leaned in a little. "We've already taken the hardest step, telling you the truth. Everything after this can be careful." Ethan rubbed his forehead. overwhelmed but also strangely relieved. They weren't asking him to rush. They weren't asking him to commit. They were asking for trust, for time, for space to explore the emotions none of them fully understood yet. The idea scared him, but it also warmed him. Part of him wanted to say yes immediately, drawn to the kindness in their voices, the sincerity in their eyes. Another part of him wanted to hide, afraid of the unknown. But above all, he wanted clarity. He wanted to understand what he truly felt, not just react to the moment. I just need time, Ethan finally said. Claire reached out and squeezed his hand lightly. You can take all the time you need. Aaron nodded. We're not going anywhere. Their understanding eased the heaviness in Ethan's chest. He finally allowed himself to breathe, again really breathe. But just as the room finally felt stable, Claire exhaled slowly and said, before you take that time, you deserve to know the last piece of the truth. Ethan stiffened. There's more. Aaron nodded with a seriousness that made Ethan's pulse quicken. Yes, one more thing. It might change how you see all of this. Ethan didn't know what it could possibly be. But the way Claire's voice softened when she spoke next made him realize it wasn't something small. Ethan, what we feel isn't uncertain anymore. We're sure of it. And we agreed on something together. Her eyes met his, full of emotion. We want to move forward only if you feel safe with us. Only if you're comfortable. Only if your heart is part of this too. Her voice trembled slightly, and we truly hope, that you'll let us show you what this could be. Ethan's breath caught, and just like that, the conversation that was supposed to bring clarity opened the door to a deeper truth, one that left him standing right on the edge of a decision he never imagined he would face. Emily's words hung in the quiet room like a soft tremor. Alex felt them settle inside him before he could even understand them. For a long second, he couldn't speak. The night outside pressed gently against the windows, the glow of the lamp, warming half of Emily's face and casting the other half into shadow. She looked nervous, but steady, ready to face whatever came next. And that alone made his chest tighten. He finally sat down across from her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like he was holding himself together. His voice came out low. Emily, I didn't expect you to say something like that. She gave a small, breathy laugh, not out of humor, but relief. I didn't expect it either. But all night, I kept thinking about how much I've been pretending. I'm tired of pretending. Alex swallowed. Pretending about what? That I'm okay? Watching you drift away, she said softly. That it doesn't bother me when you turn all your attention toward Claire. That it doesn't hurt when you say you're fine when you're not. I care about you more than I should, Alex. I always did. Tonight just pushed everything forward. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. Tonight pushed everything forward for all of us. Emily nodded. I know. Her eyes softened. I wasn't trying to take anything from Claire. Kay, I hope you know that. I wasn't trying to compete or convince. Kay, I just needed you to know where my heart is before you make any decision you can't undo. Alex stared at the floor for a moment, his pulse unsteady. I feel caught between two people who mean a lot to me. You're not trapped, Emily said. That's the one thing I want you to understand. You're allowed to choose what feels right, not what feels expected. He let her words sink in. Outside, a distant car passed, headlights briefly brushing through the curtains. A soft reminder that life was still moving, even when his world felt paused. Emily, he finally said, lifting his gaze to meet hers. I care about you, maybe, more than I realized. Tonight made me see things I'd been ignoring. But Claire, she's been part of my life for years. I never imagined something could shift that. A flicker of sadness moved across Emily's face, but she didn't look away. I know, and that's why I don't want to push you. I don't want to become someone you resent for complicating your life. She hesitated. But I also won't pretend I don't feel what I feel. He felt the weight of her honesty, steady, gentle, and real. It had none of the pressure that came from Claire, none of the loaded expectations or assumptions. Emily's honesty felt like a hand offered, not a demand made. Alex stood and paced the small living room, tension in each step. He thought about every moment from the night when Claire asked him to choose her fully. When Emily looked heartbroken, when he felt torn so sharply he couldn't breathe. He remembered the moments years earlier when Claire had been soft and warm and easy. He remembered the quiet afternoons when Emily's presence had made him feel understood without effort. He finally turned toward her. "You asked me earlier what I wanted," he said quietly, "but I didn't know the answer until just now." Emily held still, hope flickering but fragile. "And now?" "Now I know I want to stop living in the past," Alex said. "I want to stop choosing out of fear. I want something that feels like partnership, not pressure. Something honest." Her breath hitched, though she tried to hide it. But he added gently, "I need to talk to Claire before I choose anything. She deserves that. We have years between us, and I can't pretend they never happened. I can't make a decision in the dark and call it love." Emily slowly nodded. "I understand." He walked back to her and crouched beside her chair. "Thank you for telling me the truth," he said. "Thank you for trusting me with it." Emily's voice trembled softly. "Whatever happens, Alex, I want you to be happy, even if it isn't with me." He squeezed her hand lightly, something warm and quiet passing between them, a promise of honesty, not certainty. "I'll talk to Claire tomorrow," he said. Emily nodded again. "'Kay." They sat in silence for a moment, a silence that didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a turning point. Then Alex stood, grabbed his coat, and walked toward the door. Before he opened it, he turned back. "Emily." She looked up. "Tonight I felt something change. And no matter what happens next, I don't want this honesty between us to disappear." "It won't," she whispered. Alex stepped outside, the cool night air hitting him with the clarity he desperately needed. The sky was wide and quiet above the street, and for the first time in months, he felt like he was walking toward something instead of running from something. The next afternoon, he met Claire at a quiet cafe near the river. She had already ordered her tea, her hands wrapped around the warm cup. When she looked up and saw him, her smile wavered. "You wanted to talk," she said. Alex sat down, heart steady but heavy. "Yeah, I wanted to talk about last night." Claire folded her hands. I figured. He took a breath. "Claire, we've been drifting for a while. I didn't see it clearly until you asked me to choose you in that moment. It didn't feel right because I wasn't choosing from love. I was choosing from fear." Her expression cracked, slightly hurt. Confusion, realization, all mingling together. "Fear of what?" "Losing what we used to be," Alex said gently. "But that's not love, Claire. That's holding on to old memories like they're promises." She blinked quickly. "So what? Are you saying?" "I'm saying we've been trying to go back to something that doesn't exist anymore," he replied, his voice soft but clear. "And I don't want to do that to either of us." Claire looked away, blinking back tears, but she nodded slowly. "I think I knew that. I just didn't want to say it first." Alex reached across the table and squeezed her hand, kind, steady, grateful. "You'll always be part of my life, but not like before." Claire exhaled shakily. "And Emily?" "He didn't lie. I care about her." Claire gave a small, sad smile. "Then go see where it leads." That evening, Alex walked back to Emily's apartment. He knocked, heart beating fast, not from fear but from hope. Emily opened the door. "Alex." He stepped inside, the warmth of her home wrapping around him like something familiar he had never dared to name. "I talked to Claire," he said. Emily held her breath, and Alex took her hands gently. "I want to move forward. With honesty. With someone who sees me clearly. I want that with you." Her eyes filled with quiet emotion, not overwhelming, not dramatic, just real. "Are you sure?" she whispered. For the first time in a long time, Alex said, "Yes." Emily let out a slow breath, a soft smile shaping her lips. Then, "Stay." He stayed. Not because of what either of them asked that night, but because, finally, their hearts were moving in the same direction. And for once, that was enough.